Na to je reagirao Boban, isto tako grubo u smislu.
Kaleye vurdu ve gol! Atıyor Siyans!
Hi, I'm Victor. You are probably wondering why I have a mask on my face and who I am. Like everyone else, I have a story. It takes 90 minutes to watch soccer, but a lifetime is not enough to talk about soccer. As we have time, we will try to tell you through stories that soccer is not only a game played on the field, but also a big life. Jupp Derwall, who did not have a very good career as a footballer, was mainly involved in coaching. He was Helmut Schön's assistant in the German national team in 1978 and became European champion in 1972 and world champion in 1974. After Schön's departure in 1978, Derwall became the national team's technical director and made Germany European champions again in 1988. Before the first match of the World Cup in Spain in 1982, he said that if we lost to Algeria, he would leave the team in Spain and come back. But despite the defeat by the Africans, he led his country to the lead. Under his leadership, the Germans eliminated France in the semi-finals in a thriller that made soccer history. However, a poor performance at the European Championships 2 years later led to Derwall's resignation. After that, the specialist continued his career at Galatasaray. Derwall's activity there marked the beginning of a new chapter in the history of the team and Turkish football in general. In addition to satisfying the longing of a team that had not won a title in 12 years, his 3 years of work laid the foundation for the Lions to reach the semi-finals of the Champions Cup in the future. Fatih Terim and Mustafa Denizli, two of Turkey's legendary coaches, made use of Derwall. Derwall worked in Turkey for several years, and in 1993 he wrote the book Turkey's Memories about his time there. He dedicates the book to 17-year-old DURSUN OZBEK, whom many people did not know. If you want to know why the book is dedicated to DURSUN OZBEK, I can read it for you. It was a Tuesday I will never forget. The whole Galatasaray family held a summer morning for their young soccer player named DURSUN. His reserve teammates gathered by his coffin on the street where the clubhouse was located. They carried him on their shoulders to the hearse and took him to the mosque. His mother took my hand, hugged me, and thanked me. Neither of us had anything to say. We were so worried that we took a few more steps. Then we were going to entrust him to Allah and leave him alone. We gathered in the courtyard of the Shishli Mosque, where there was a big crowd, and greeted him. For now, my young friend, we will meet again. We trained on the natural grass field above Floria. The sky was grey and cloudy. It was not a pleasant weather, but we were in good spirits. It had been half an hour since the training started. After the goal, there was a lot of resting, shouting, and cheering. We were practicing speed. We measured endurance. According to the program, we first did high-tempo runs, then short passing drills running all over the field. On the neighboring field, Bülent, a former national team player, had a team of players between the ages of 16 and 18 train. It was a busy day at the camp. We were also watching the youngsters of Galatasaray, the players of the future. As usual, there were spectators on the sidelines. They were already part of the training. The fans could never be ignored, because they were motivating the team. When the main and youth teams finished training at the same time, I would always organize a match for both sides on our beautiful and attractive pitch, and create conditions for them to practice what they had learned in training. I used to do this every 2 or 3 weeks, and my players enjoyed it more than regular training sessions. I would mainly divide the teams into groups of 7. I didn't increase the number of people in the teams, because the size of our pitch was 40 to 70. The aim was to play fast. Holding the ball too much and dribbling too much was forbidden. If any team broke this rule, the ball was given to the other team. On that cloudy afternoon, it was business as usual in Galatasaray's camp in Floria. The match between the first 2 teams ended successfully. The players went to the locker room to go home, happy to meet their families. I promised my wife that we would have dinner in a restaurant, we would go to Fisherman Hassan's fish house by the sea in Yeşilköy, one of the best fish restaurants in Istanbul. Suddenly Arif, our midfielder, appeared in front of me. It was as if he came out of the ground. He hasn't been seen since the beginning of the training. As usual, he was late for training this time. He gave a good excuse. I accepted his excuse so as not to prolong the matter and waste time. In the last match of the day, both sides were ready to give their best. After a long day of training, it was clear that they were all eager. I asked Bülent, the head coach of the youth team on the other side of the fence, to send a player over here. We needed one more player against Arif to make the team even in numbers. Bülent picked one and sent him to me. It was DURSUN. He looked happy as always. It was clear that he was happy to play with the players from the main team. I whistled and started the game. This time speed was going to play a very important role in the game. Since the teams consisted of 8 players, the space for movement and time on the ball decreased in parallel with the possibilities of the game. It all started 10 minutes later. The defenders passed the ball to DURSUN in the midfield. He attacked towards the opponent's goal. As he advanced with the ball, he was looking for a teammate to support him. Suddenly he slowed down and lost control. His movements were like he was rolling. He moved his arms as if to catch himself. Who knows, maybe he was trying to scream for help out of fear. I froze as if someone was falling into a bottomless pit. I knew something bad was happening. I stood up to help the young man who was lying on the ground and had no vital reaction. I ran to Mehmet, our masseur. He too realized that something bad had happened. When I got there, Mehmet had fainted and was kneeling next to DURSUN, who was motionless. DURSUN's pupils froze. It was clear he felt nothing. Mehmet was trying to pull out his tongue, which was curled up in his throat, to save him. I couldn't feel his pulse, so I pressed his hand to his chest and started CPR. But there was no heartbeat. His body was motionless. We could see the horror on the faces of the players gathered around us. We sent 2 of our players to call a doctor and find an ambulance. We waited impatiently for DURSUN to come to. Every second counted. Even the kiss of life was not enough for this young body to start breathing again. One of his young teammates knelt beside him. He turned his head to the side to relieve his mouth and windpipe, to get his heart working again. The ambulance still hadn't arrived. I had never been so angry. Nothing worked when it mattered most. There was no coordination. It was impossible to control things. If something happens on time, it's a coincidence. Suddenly I remembered the police car that was waiting behind the fence, near the houses during training. Luckily it was still there. I rushed there. This was the last hope of salvation. I told the police that I needed an ambulance and they came immediately. They got in the car and drove around the field. They passed through the back gate of the camp and came to us and took DURSUN to the hospital. DURSUN still had no pulse. We did everything to get his heart beating. I opened his chest and did CPR again. Suddenly his heart started beating again, but it was beating very weakly. A doctor and an ambulance with the necessary equipment had not yet arrived. The police were trying to contact the hospitals and arrange for an ambulance to be sent. Without oxygen and proper medication, DURSUN had no chance of survival. The police were ready to take him to the hospital in Bakırköy in their car. We took that risk. Otherwise we would have lost him because we were lying in the middle of the field. One miracle would be enough. Bülent and Mehmet got into the police car and drove to DURSUN's side, struggling all the way to keep him alive. But they couldn't. 300 meters from the hospital, DURSUN died in the arms of his coach Bülent and Masseur Mehmet. It is also a helplessness to witness the death of this young man. I had never seen people so distraught before a funeral. No one could believe that such a beloved young man had died. I was also lost in their thoughts. I was thinking about different times in my coaching career, about my children Patrick and Manuela. I was exhausted. I had to hold on for another year. We wanted to be champions for the second time. I had 30 years of good times with young people. We had successes together, defeats, injustices. I would have sacrificed all the championships and the brightest victories in my career so that DURSUN would live. I would like to dedicate this book to DURSUN. He reminded me what wonderful years I had in my life, how lucky I am, how much football has given me throughout my life. But unfortunately, DURSUN didn't have access to most of it. Like his peers, his heart was beating with soccer. But one day in training, in the middle of the match, his heart stopped, on condition that we beat it again. His heart wasn't beating and it wouldn't beat forever. He was so far away from the dreams he thought would one day come true. I'll never forget that day. The stories I've told show that we can't treat soccer as an ordinary sport. Football may not be important to those who don't watch it, but for its fans, nothing is more important.